Hey everyone, let's talk about tripod shooting this week. So, back in the day, we had a shutter release that was basically a cable. And if you didn't screw the cable in place and just pushed on the plunger, you could see that all it did was push a flexible rod down the tube, and that's what pushed the shutter. It was a simple but effective way to do it. Now, the shutter buttons back then had threads on them. So you could screw this little piece in, push the button, and the button had a screw tension on the side. So you could tighten that and it would leave the shutter open. Now, these were absolutely awesome if you wanted to do astral photography, because all you had to do is screw that in place, go outside, get your camera set up, push that shutter, lock that shutter in place, and then come back however much longer you wanted to take. So if you wanted to take a photograph for an hour, you didn't have to deal with some little electronic thing that you needed to set for an hour, so it was going to open the shutter up and you have a delay of about 15-20 seconds so you could walk away from the camera or any of that stuff. You just walked out, pushed that shutter down, and walked away from the camera. Easy as that. When you wanted to unshutter the camera, you walked back to it. Now, it was simple. It was straightforward. It carried some issues doing that. As you can imagine, if you were doing that for astral photography and you left the shutter open, how do you walk to and from the camera if you want to leave it open for an hour? Unless you're going to sit next to it, you're probably going to need some kind of light. And keeping it low would be fine because the lens is not going to see it. However, you are going to change the ambient light around it. And if the camera sees an ambient light change, it could change the shutter settings that you've got, unless you've got them locked in. So it sat in the realm of both manual photography, right? You're doing all of your settings by hand, so the camera's not doing anything for you. And you're locking the thing open and then walking in and out in the dark. But for anybody who used to do photo photography working in dark rooms, especially if you were working on color film, it was pitch black. So you got used to it anyway. Now, 2025, I have an R5 camera. And it has an electronic shutter, which is really awesome, right? I can push that button on the electronic shutter and it takes a picture. It has two settings, one for a normal photograph and one for a movie. And the difference, I believe, between the two is the fact that when you're doing the shutter, you're just going to push it and the shutter is going to work. But in movie mode, when you push it, that's start. And when you push it again, that's going to be stop. So you don't have to worry about holding the shutter open for the entire time of the movie. However, whereas back in the day it was as simple as screwing this thing in, or the old electronic ones would just plug into a port on your camera. I didn't talk about those. They had digital displays on them. They were really nice devices. They plugged into a port on your camera. You set your information that you needed for it, depending on the unit. At the very least, it was going to be how long is the shutter going to be open, and is there going to be a delay before it opens the shutter, and walked away, leaving this device attached to your camera. Now, you'd want to have some place to attach it to the tripod, and the reason I say that is because if the wind happens to come up while it's out there, this device is going to blow in the wind and it's going to vibrate your tripod. So you needed to have it locked down. But these new buttons don't require anything like that, right? You're just going to hit the button. However, the button is just going to do what the normal button on the top would do, or what that other shutter release would do if you didn't have the lockdown. It's just going to push the shutter button for you. On an R5, however, you can't just shoot the way your camera was set up. You have to go in and change the drive mode of the camera to basically what would be a self timer. right? You know, these cameras have self-timers on them so that you can get into the shot. Got a little light on there that's going to flash at you to let you know that the time's getting close as the flash gets faster, usually. It's letting you know that, hey, smile because the camera's about to go off. The nice part about this is that you've got the remote shutter and there's no cables or anything to worry about. The downside is for an R5, you have to change the mode. And once you get your camera set up, which is what I did the other night, I got it all set. I got my lighting up. All right. I got my LED light, which required quite a bit of that LED light because I was shooting a group photograph. Now, if you're shooting an individual, you can get the light a lot closer. But when you're shooting a group, you're kind of further away. It does add some shadows to the wall behind the people. But at the same time, it does give you more lighting so that you can shoot at a higher shutter or a lower ISO. So I was able to get it with a 400 ISO last night and almost 1/200th of a second using this lighting. But here's the problem. Once you've got all that stuff set up, if you forget to set the drive mode, you can't use the shutter unless you break the system down to the point where you can get to it. Now, the reason I say break it down is I'm short. All right. The camera was at a height that I could use it, but not look through the eyepiece. It was at a height where I could look through the screen and line up my shot that way and make sure everything looked okay on the screen. But it wasn't something that I could do to easily get to where the function key is and change my drive. So I ended up having to use the button on the camera itself. So don't be me. If you're going out to get everything set up and you take the time to set up everything, make sure you also take the time to make sure that your shutter button's working and that you've got your camera set into the right mode. Now the shutter button worked. I tried it right afterwards when I could get the camera down and try the drive mode. So everything was going to work. I just didn't set the drive mode up. Now, the one interesting thing about the drive mode being set like that, however, is you still get a flash of the light. It's an instant click of the shutter, but you're still getting that little flash up there that would normally accompany the timer, which is kind of good and kind of bad. It does draw people's attention to the camera. They're going to see that flash and then look at the camera. But if they're surprised by that flash, you might get a different set of pictures than you were anticipating. Now, I was working with a great group of people. It was a volunteer reception. We were celebrating 3 award-winning volunteers. And to get that picture was super simple. Everybody was there. They were happy. They were having a good time. It was easy to get that photograph. Not always going to be the case when you're taking these photographs, and you may have to work people a little bit more. And that means talking to them, getting them to laugh, getting them to smile. It also might mean having to position them a little bit more. These guys just got into position. They got all lined up. They were wrapped a little bit, which is fine. I had a wide angle lens, so I had plenty of space to get everybody that I needed to get from where I was. It made it for an easy photograph, except for the fact that I didn't have the shutter ready to go. Again, the more of these you do, a lot of the stuff is just going to become second nature, and you're just going to do it without thinking about it. But at the flip side is when you don't think about it, that means that you can sometimes forget things if something interrupts that pattern that you've got. All right, when you're setting things up and you've got a pattern, a way that you're doing things, and you're not running like a checklist off in your head, as you get done, you might have forgotten something. And that's what happened in this case. I wasn't running a checklist in my head of all the different steps that I wanted to have in place. I was using these lights, which I haven't used outside of a studio in a while. I was working with a brand new tripod, very stiff, working that, talking to people while I was working, and Then I got everything set up and then realized that the tripod was not in exactly the position that it needed to be for the photograph to be taken, because when I think about taking a photograph, and I've got the head in place and I've got my controllers in the back, because I'm used to using just a single arm controller. And by that, I mean that if you look at a standard tripod, you have the long arm that comes out in the back that does nothing but tip the camera up and down. You've got a little one in the front that allows you to flip the thing up and down. And then you've got the other one to allow you to spin it. But the big arm is that singular arm. Well, this camera doesn't have one big singular arm. It's got two. And because of that, I get thrown off on where the camera is supposed to face. When you take the plate off at the bottom, the plate nicely has a thing on it that says lens and an arrow to point to where the lens is supposed to be, so that you know when you lock the plate in place, that's where the lens goes. The downside to that is that doesn't mean that you put the head in the right spot for where that lens has to go. So you may have to turn your head around a little bit once you get things set up, which is what I had to do in this case. And the newness of the tripod and the setup, and me having to go back and correct the plate on the head, was just enough for me to forget about, oh yeah, change the drive before you put the camera on the head. I went to go put the camera up there and like, wait a minute, the lens goes here, but the head's not in the right spot. I got to move everything. And that was that step that I would have taken to change the drive on the camera. So I guess if the best thing that you can do is, yes, if you get used to things, you might miss something. So just have like a little checklist of things that you're going to do as you're setting up your camera when you go out, and have a good time. And that's what I got for you this week. And I will talk to you all next week.